They told me to eat in the garage. In the house I built with my own 2 hands. My son just watched, silent, while his wife erased my life. They thought the old carpenter was broken. They were about to find out I still knew how to use a hammer. If you're listening to this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Let me back up and tell you how it all started. How a man can become a ghost in his own home. It began on a Tuesday, a cold, wet November Tuesday. The rain hit the windows sideways, a relentless drumming that matched the chill settling deep in my bones. I was in my workshop. The smell of sawdust and cherry wood usually calmed me. Not that day. I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked through the house. My house. 30 years I spent building it. Every beam raised, every nail hammered by me. It was my sanctuary, the place filled with the echoes of my late wife, Mary. But the moment I opened the front door, the sanctuary felt violated. There stood Chloe, my daughter-in-law. Behind her were her parents, Frank and Linda. They were surrounded by luggage. Expensive luggage. Too much for a short visit. "Robert, thank goodness," Chloe gasped. Her voice was high, tight. A performance. "There's been a disaster." Frank pushed past me, dragging a massive suitcase. It scraped against the hardwood floor I had laid myself. "Our condo flooded," he announced, not looking at me. "Completely ruined. Catastrophic." Linda followed, adjusting an expensive-looking silk scarf. She didn't look at me either. She looked past me, assessing the foyer. Her eyes were critical. "Cold, just until the insurance sorts it out, Robert dear," Linda said. I looked at them. They were dressed for a dinner party. Not a disaster. Their car in the driveway was spotless. No mud, no smell of mildew. They smelled like expensive perfume and an entitlement that choked the air. Something felt wrong, but they were family. What could I do? "Of course," I said. The words felt heavy. "Come in out of the rain." My son, Ethan, came down the stairs. He and Chloe had moved in 3 years ago to save money. I thought I was helping them build a future. I didn't realize I was funding my own eviction. Ethan hugged Linda. "We're so glad you're safe," he said. Safe. The word hung in the air, mocking me. I didn't know it then, but I had just invited the enemy inside the gates. The takeover began immediately. Within an hour, they had colonized the living room. Frank commandeered my recliner, the worn leather chair Mary gave me for my 50th birthday. My spot. He kicked his feet up on the ottoman I'd carved for her, the one with the intricate rose pattern. He crushed the delicate design with his heavy boots. "Got any decent scotch, Bob?" Frank bellowed. He picked up the bottle on the sideboard and sneered. "This stuff you've got here is gasoline. Bob." I hated when he called me Bob. "My name is Robert." "I'll see what I have, Frank," I said, biting my tongue. The resentment was already starting to burn. A slow, steady heat in my chest. Chloe walked in from the kitchen. She looked energized, revitalized by her parents' presence. "Don't bother, Robert. Ethan is running to the store. I told him to get Dad the good stuff," the 18-year-old Glenlivet. She glanced at me, her eyes flat. "We're ordering Italian tonight. I assume you're fine with whatever." It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal. I was the help, the servant in the house I owned. But the real blow was still to come. Later that evening, the first shot was fired. We were discussing sleeping arrangements. I assumed they would take the 2 guest rooms upstairs. I was wrong. "Robert, we need to settle this," Chloe said. Her arms were crossed, her expression tight. She always crossed her arms when she was about to deliver an ultimatum. "Obviously," she continued, "Mom and Dad need the master suite." I stared at her. The absurdity stole my breath. The master suite. Mary's room. The room where I still sometimes thought I could smell her rose perfume. The room where we spent 30 years together. The master suite? "Chloe, that's my room." She didn't blink. The dismissal was swift, brutal. "They require the ensuite bathroom, Robert. They are used to certain comforts." Comforts. I thought about the years I worked double shifts to pay the mortgage, the years I spent building this place while working a full-time job. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, my voice tight. "The couch downstairs is perfectly fine," Linda interjected, smoothing her skirt. "It's only temporary, after all. Don't be difficult." Difficult. I was being difficult by wanting to sleep in my own bed. I looked at Ethan, my son, my blood. He was standing by the fireplace, staring intently at the flames. His shoulders were slumped. "Ethan?" I asked, my voice pleading. He wouldn't look at me. His silence was a betrayal. Dad, please, he muttered. They've had a rough day. Let's just keep the peace. Keep the peace. By surrendering my dignity. Fine, I whispered. The word tasted like ash. That night, I slept on the couch. My back screamed in protest. The house felt cold. It didn't feel like mine anymore. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was so wrong. The erasure began the next morning. It was slow at first, subtle, a systematic dismantling of my life. Piece by piece, I woke up stiff and sore. The living room was freezing. I stumbled into the kitchen, craving coffee. Linda was already there, criticizing the layout to Chloe. The kitchen, my domain, the space I designed for Mary's love of baking. This island is completely wrong, Linda announced. She tapped the granite countertop I had installed myself. The granite Mary picked out. It cuts the room in half. We should knock down this wall. It's so dark and dreary in here. Dreary. The word stung. Mary loved the morning light in that kitchen. It was the heart of our home. Chloe sipped her latte. They had brought their own expensive espresso machine. It whirred loudly on the counter. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. Robert, did you have to leave your shoes by the door? It looks cluttered, and frankly, they smell. My work boots, the boots I wore when I laid the foundation of this house, the boots that carried me through 40 years of hard work. Now they were just clutter, smelly clutter. I moved them silently. The knot of anger tightened in my stomach. They were making me feel unwelcome, unwanted, an intruder in my own life. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the old pot. I didn't want their fancy coffee. I wanted my routine, my life, but it was slipping away. Later that day, the invasion escalated. It wasn't just about space anymore. It was about control. I went upstairs to get a fresh shirt. More importantly, I needed my heart medication. I kept it in the ensuite bathroom. I reached for the doorknob. It wouldn't turn. Locked. I stood there, rattling the knob. Disbelief washed over me. Locked out of my own room, in my own house. It felt like a sick joke. But nobody was laughing. I found Ethan in the garage. My workshop, my sanctuary. He was pretending to organize my tools. He was moving things around aimlessly, disrupting the meticulous order I maintained. My system, my craft. Ethan, the bedroom door is locked. My voice was tight. He avoided my eyes. He focused intently on a box of nails, as if it held the secrets of the universe. Chloe needed privacy, he mumbled. She's helping her mom unpack. Ethan, all my clothes are in there. My medication. My life. I know, Dad. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. A performance of exhaustion. Things are incredibly stressful right now with the flood and everything. The flood. The excuse for everything. He looked at me then. His eyes were pleading. Try to be patient with her. They lost everything. Patience. He asked for patience while his wife annexed my home, while her parents colonized my space, while I was sleeping on the couch, my blood pressure rising. I looked at my son, and I saw a stranger, a weak, compliant stranger. I walked away. The silence in the garage echoed the growing distance between us. He was choosing them over me, again. The next few days were a blur of small insults, a constant chipping away at my dignity. I found Mary's watercolors, the ones she painted of the garden, stuffed in the back of the hall closet, replaced by cheap modern prints Linda had bought. Frank started using my expensive Japanese chisels to open paint cans, tools I had honed for decades. When I confronted him, he laughed. Relax, Bob. They're just tools. They weren't just tools. They were extensions of my hands, my livelihood, my history. I retreated to my workshop. It was the only place that still felt like mine, but even that sanctuary was eventually violated. Chloe started complaining about the noise, the sawdust, the smell of the wood finish. Robert, must you do that all day? She snapped one afternoon, standing in the doorway, wrinkling her nose. It's giving me a headache, and the smell is drifting into the house. I'm working, Chloe. Well, work quieter, she said. Or better yet, find a hobby that doesn't disturb everyone. Disturb everyone. I was an inconvenience, an obstacle. I tried talking to Ethan again, cornered him in the kitchen late one night. Ethan, we need to talk. This isn't working. They've been here a week. When are they leaving? He looked trapped. Soon, Dad. The insurance is complicated. Complicated? Or convenient? He stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? It means they don't act like people who lost everything. I said, my voice low. They act like people who just inherited a mansion. That's unfair, he hissed, glancing nervously toward the stairs. Chloe is doing her best. You're the one making things difficult. There it was again. Difficult. The word felt like a slap. I'm making things difficult by living in my own house. It's our house too, Dad, he said, his voice rising. And frankly, you're not the easiest person to live with. You're set in your ways. Stuck in the past. Stuck in the past. He used my love for Mary as a weapon. My heart cracked. The pain was sharp. Real. I walked away. I couldn't look at him, my own son. I knew then that I was losing him, losing everything. But the breaking point was still to come, and when it came, it shattered me completely. It happened 2 days later. A small thing, seemingly insignificant, but it was the final straw. The moment the fragile piece shattered into a million pieces. I walked into the living room and stopped cold. The air left my chest. I couldn't breathe. The large portrait of Mary that hung above the fireplace was gone. Her smile used to light up the room. Her eyes were filled with the warmth and kindness that defined her. She was the soul of this house. In its place was a bland, modern art print of a cityscape. Something cheap, impersonal. Something you'd find in a discount hotel. The silence in the room roared in my ears. The erasure was complete. Where is she? My voice was dangerously low, vibrating with a fury I hadn't felt in years. Frank was sitting in my chair again. He didn't look up from his newspaper. Too depressing, he mumbled, turning a page. Liven the place up a bit. He glanced at the new painting. That old picture was morbid. Morbid. My Mary. The love of my life. A cold rage flooded my veins. It was sharp, focused. I walked out of the room before I did something I would regret. I searched the house, the closets, the garage, the basement. I finally found it. Leaning against the wall in the cramped space under the stairs, shoved behind old vacuum cleaner parts and forgotten umbrellas, discarded like trash. The frame was cracked, the glass shattered. I stood there, gripping the doorframe until my knuckles turned white. Mary. Discarded. Forgotten. Erased. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't breathe the same air as them. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to think. This wasn't just insensitive. This was intentional. This was cruel. I drove for an hour, the anger slowly fading, replaced by a profound sadness, a realization that this was no longer a misunderstanding. This was a war, and I was losing. When I returned, the house was ablaze with light. Laughter echoed from the dining room. They were having a dinner party, celebrating their successful takeover. I walked into the kitchen. The table was set with Mary's fine china. The crystal glasses sparkled. A catered meal. Expensive wine. I was hungry. I hadn't eaten all day. I opened the refrigerator and grabbed some leftover stew. I started heating it up in the microwave. Chloe walked in. She wrinkled her nose at the smell of the stew. Robert, really? That smell is nauseating. I stopped. The microwave hummed in the silence. We're trying to have a civilized evening, she continued, her voice sharp with irritation. Can you please eat in the garage? Or outside? Eat in the garage, like a dog. The humiliation burned hot and sharp. I put the spoon down slowly. The metal clattered against the ceramic bowl. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. No, Chloe, I will not eat in the garage. This is my house. Don't be difficult, she snapped. We are hosting my parents. They deserve a peaceful environment. They deserved it. I didn't. Civilized, I asked, the word dripping with contempt. You've moved into my house, taken my room, locked me out, and hidden my wife's portrait. This is not civilized. This is an invasion. Linda appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with wine and indignation. How dare you speak to my daughter that way? We are guests here. You are overstaying your welcome, I said, my voice shaking with controlled fury. That's when Chloe delivered the ultimatum. Her eyes were like ice chips, her voice dripping with contempt. She had the audacity to look bored, as if my pain was an inconvenience. Robert, this arrangement clearly isn't working, she stated, crossing her arms. Your presence is making everyone uncomfortable. We need space. We need peace. I waited, expecting her to suggest they find a hotel. Realizing how foolish that hope was, they weren't going anywhere, which meant I had to. It's clear you're not happy here, she continued, as casually as if she were discussing the weather. So maybe it's time you left. The air left the room. The silence was absolute, heavy, suffocating. "Leave," I whispered. "Leave my home? Just for a while, Robert," she said, her voice softening slightly. "A performance of concern. Get a hotel room. Clear your head. We need the space while my parents adjust." I looked at Linda. She nodded, approvingly. I looked at Frank. He just smirked from the dining room table. He raised his glass in a mock toast. They had planned this, orchestrated this moment. And then I looked at Ethan. My son, he was standing behind his wife, his face pale, his eyes pleading with me. Not to stay, but to go quietly, to not make a scene, to accept the unacceptable. The betrayal was a physical blow. It buckled my knees. He was choosing them. He was letting them throw me out of the house I built for our family, the sanctuary I created for Mary. "You'd better leave, Robert," Linda added, her voice sharp. "We won't have enough room for 5 people. It's simply too cramped in this little house." Little house, my legacy. The silence stretched. The life I knew was over. "Fine," I whispered. The word tasted like poison. Defeat. I grabbed my coat. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip it. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take my medication. I just walked out into the cold, driving rain. The sound of their laughter echoed behind me. The heavy oak doors slammed shut with a finality that rattled my bones. It felt like the lid of a coffin closing over me. The slamming of the front door felt like the end of my life. The rain soaked through my coat immediately. The cold bit deep into my bones, chilling me in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. I sat in my truck, the engine idling. The wipers blurred the warm, glowing windows of my house, a house that was no longer mine. They were inside, warm, celebrating. I was outside, cold, alone. I drove aimlessly for hours. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. The city passed by in a haze. The grief was a physical ache, a tightness in my chest. I finally pulled into the parking lot of a cheap motel off the highway. The flickering vacancy sign buzzed in the darkness, a beacon for the lost and the lonely. It felt appropriate. The room smelled of stale smoke and regret. It was small, cramped. The wallpaper was peeling. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress. The reality of the situation crashed down on me. I was 65 years old, widowed, and effectively homeless, exiled by my own child. The exhaustion was bone deep. I looked at my reflection in the dusty mirror. I didn't recognize the tired, broken man staring back at me, hollow eyes, a face etched with grief and betrayal. How had it come to this? I had given Ethan everything. I thought I was supporting them. I didn't realize I was enabling them. I had let them walk all over me in the name of family, but this wasn't family. This was abuse. The silence in the motel room was heavy, broken only by the sound of the highway traffic. Lives moving forward while mine had stalled. My mind drifted back, the memories sharp and painful. I saw Mary, standing in the unfinished frame of the house, the skeleton of our future rising around us. A sunny afternoon, the scent of sawdust and fresh-cut lumber. She was wearing my old tool belt, laughing as she tried to hammer a nail. "It's perfect, Robert," she had whispered, wrapping her arms around my waist. Her rose perfume mingled with the scent of the wood. "It's a home for our family, our fortress, forever." I promised her then, promised I would always protect our family, always keep our home safe. I had failed. The memory was a sharp jab of pain, a twist of the knife. But it also ignited something inside me, a spark of anger, a flicker of resolve in the darkness. If this story is hitting home, please drop a like. It was in that moment I knew I wasn't just going to fade away. I wasn't going to let them erase me. Erase Mary. I wasn't going to let them steal the fortress I had built. They thought I was weak, old, broken. They were wrong. I picked up my phone. My fingers trembled. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Mark Davis, an old friend, and the sharpest real estate attorney in the state. He handled the paperwork when Mary and I set up the trust, a detail I had almost forgotten. Mary always was the smart one, the planner. "Robert, it's late. Is everything all right?" Mark's voice was groggy but instantly concerned. "No, Mark, Everything is not all right, I said, my voice rough. I need your help. They kicked me out. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a heavy, loaded silence. Tell me everything, Robert, Mark said, his voice suddenly sharp. Awake, and don't leave anything out. The fight had just begun. The next morning, I met Mark at his office. The downtown high-rise felt sterile and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the home I had lost. I told him everything, the sudden arrival, the takeover, Ethan's silence, the cracked portrait, the ultimatum. Mark listened patiently. His expression grew darker with every detail. He took notes on a yellow legal pad. The scratching of his pen, the only sound in the room. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes filled with a cold fury that mirrored my own. Robert, this is more than just a family disagreement, he said, his voice tight. This is illegal eviction, elder abuse, and potentially fraud. Fraud? I asked, confused. I thought it was just greed, cruelty. Story about the flooded condo, Mark said. It feels too convenient. They arrived too prepared. No distress, no calls to insurance adjusters. He picked up his phone. Let me do some digging. I have contacts in the county assessor's office. I want to check the property records for Frank and Linda's condo. While Mark started his investigation, I wasn't just sitting idle. I needed eyes on the house. I called Sarah Jenkins, Mary's best friend, and the nosest neighbor on the block. Sarah, it's Robert. I need a favor. Anything, Robert? She said, her voice instantly concerned. Are you all right? I haven't seen your truck. I explained the situation briefly. The flood, the tension, my sudden need for a vacation.
Something was wrong, Sarah whispered, her voice laced with suspicion. They've been acting like they own the place. And Robert, there's something else. My blood ran cold. What is it, Sarah? A man was here yesterday, she said. Suit, fancy car. He was taking pictures of the house.
Looked like a realtor. And I heard Chloe talking on the porch. She mentioned a quick sale. A quick sale. They weren't just planning to stay. They were planning to sell my home. My legacy. The betrayal deepened. The urgency intensified. Mark's investigation took 3 days. 3 long days. I stayed at the motel. The isolation gnawed at me. I ignored Ethan's texts. Dad, where are you? Chloe is worried. Please call me. Worried. I doubted that. They were probably worried I'd come back and interrupt their plans. When Mark called, his voice was grim. Robert, you need to come down to the office. We have a lot to discuss, and you need to prepare yourself. Prepare myself. The words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I knew then that the truth was worse than I imagined. When I arrived, Mark had a stack of documents spread out on his desk. Financial records, property deeds, email transcripts, the evidence of their betrayal laid bare in black and white. There was no flood, Robert, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. I waited. The silence stretched. Frank and Linda didn't own a condo, Mark continued. They never did. They were renting a small apartment downtown. He slid a document across the desk. An eviction notice. They were evicted 3 weeks ago, Mark said. Non-payment of rent. 6 months behind. I stared at him, trying to process the information. Evicted? But they always seemed so wealthy. The expensive clothes, the travel, the car. All smoke and mirrors, Robert, Mark said. He tapped a thick document, a bankruptcy filing. They are broke, decades of bad investments, gambling debts. He looked at me, his eyes filled with pity. Frank has a penchant for the racetracks, a serious gambling addiction. They have nothing left, no assets, no income. Their credit is destroyed. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They didn't come to visit. They came to stay. They saw my house, my large paid-off house, as their salvation, their retirement plan. It wasn't just entitlement. It was calculated manipulation. They targeted you, Robert, Mark continued. They saw you as an easy mark, a lonely, grieving old man who wouldn't fight back. And Chloe, She wasn't just a participant. She was the architect. What about the realtor Sarah saw? I asked. Mark nodded grimly. That was David Chen, known for quick, discreet sales, often below market value for cash buyers. Chloe contacted him 2 weeks ago. They were planning to list the house as soon as you were out of the picture. What about Ethan? I whispered, dreading the answer. My son. Surely he didn't know the full extent. Mark sighed, the sound heavy with regret. Ethan knew, Robert. He knew about the eviction. He knew they were moving in permanently. I don't know if he knew about the plan to sell the house, but he was complicit. His silence was his consent. My blood ran cold. My own son, lying to me, conspiring against me. But the worst betrayal was yet to come, the one that revealed the true extent of their cruelty. Mark slid another document across the desk. This one stung more than the others. It was an email chain between Chloe and another law firm. Chloe contacted a lawyer last month, Mark said, his voice tight with disgust, asking about the process for obtaining power of attorney. Power of attorney. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Toxic. She claimed you were showing signs of cognitive decline, Mark continued, reading from the email. Forgetfulness. Confusion. Paranoia. She was laying the groundwork to take control of everything. Your finances. Your property. Your life. Cognitive decline. They weren't just trying to steal my house. They were trying to steal my autonomy. My dignity. They were trying to make me disappear. To lock me away in a nursing home and forget I ever existed. The sheer audacity. The calculated cruelty. It stole my breath. I looked at the evidence. The lies. The manipulation. The betrayal. The anger solidified into cold resolve. I was done grieving. I was ready to fight. So what do we do now? I asked, my voice steady. Mark smiled grimly. Now, Robert, we take back your house, and we do it in a way they will never forget. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a document I hadn't seen in years. The original deed of trust, established by Mary and me. Mary was a smart woman, Robert, Mark said, damping the document. She protected you. She protected your legacy. He pointed to a specific clause. The house is held in an irrevocable trust. You are the sole trustee, and the lifetime beneficiary. Ethan only inherits upon your death. He paused, letting the words sink in. They have absolutely no legal claim to the property. Ethan has no claim. Chloe has no claim. Frank and Linda certainly have no claim. They can't sell it. They can't even legally live there without your permission. But there was more, a detail I had forgotten. A provision Mary insisted on, and Mary included a very specific clause. Mark continued, a morality and residency clause. If any attempt is made by the beneficiary, Ethan, to compromise your residency or well-being, the inheritance is voided. Void. The word tasted like victory, like justice. They hadn't just kicked me out. They had disinherited themselves. They are squatters, Robert, Mark concluded, and we are going to evict them, today. And I suggest we bring the police. Given their history of fraud and the attempt to illegally sell the property, I don't want to take any chances. The plan was set. The trap was laid. They thought they had won. They were about to realize they had lost everything. The quiet determination I felt in the lawyer's office hardened into steel as I drove back toward the house. The sky was clear, the sun shining brightly, but I felt a storm brewing inside me. This time I was the thunder. I pulled into the driveway and stopped short. My blood ran cold. The sight so horrifying, so unbelievable, it paralyzed me. A large professionally printed sign was planted on the front lawn. The bright colors screamed against the backdrop of Mary's rose bushes. The estate sale. Everything must go. Antiques, tools, furniture. Estate sale. They weren't even waiting to sell the house. They were selling my life first. They were treating me as if I were already dead. I walked up the driveway. The crunch of gravel loud in the sudden silence. The front door was wide open. Strangers were milling about the living room, picking over my belongings like vultures at a carcass, examining the remnants of my life. I stepped inside and felt like I had entered a nightmare. Price tags were slapped on everything. The furniture I had crafted, the lamps Mary had collected, the books we had read together, our shared history reduced to a bargain basement clearance. The cruelty was breathtaking. They weren't just taking my house, they were dismantling my life, erasing my memories, and selling them to the highest bidder. I saw Linda pocketing cash from a man, carrying my favorite armchair, the one Frank had commandeered. "Enjoy," she said, her smile brittle and bright. "It's a very comfortable chair." I walked over to the display cabinet where Mary kept her collection of antique music boxes, delicate treasures collected over a lifetime, one for every anniversary. The cabinet was nearly empty, the delicate melodies silenced. And then I saw her, Chloe, standing by the fireplace, negotiating with a woman over the price of the cracked portrait of Mary, the one they had discarded in the closet. "It's an original oil painting," Chloe was saying, her voice smooth and practiced. The voice of a seasoned grifter. "The frame is damaged, unfortunately, but the painting itself is priceless. A family heirloom." She smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "I can let it go for $500. Priceless." And she was selling it for $500. The casual cruelty stole my breath. But the worst violation was in the workshop, my sanctuary. Frank was inside, surrounded by my tools, the tools of my trade, the instruments of my craft. He was haggling with a young contractor over the price of my table saw, the centerpiece of my workshop. "It's top of the line," Frank boasted, kicking the base of the saw with his expensive shoe. "Barely used. The old man just puttered around with it." Puttered around. 40 years of building, reduced to a hobby. I saw Ethan hovering in the background, pale, anxious. He was carrying boxes out of the office. My blueprints, my contracts, the records of my career, and discarding them in a large dumpster parked in the driveway. He saw me and froze, his eyes widening in panic. He quickly looked away, the cowardice radiating from him. The sight of my son discarding my life's work, participating in the desecration of our home, shattered the last vestiges of hope I had for him. The betrayal was complete. I walked straight up to Chloe, the portrait of Mary still clutched in the buyer's hand. "What are you doing?" My voice was vibrating with a fury that threatened to consume me. Chloe turned, startled, then quickly recovered her composure. Her eyes were cold, hard. "Robert, you're back?" We decided to clear out some of the clutter. Get rid of all this old stuff. Modernize the place. Clutter? This is my life, Chloe. These are Mary's things. These are my tools. They are just things, Robert, she said dismissively. And frankly, we need the money, the renovations. She stopped herself, realizing her mistake. The expenses are piling up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have customers. She turned her back on me. The ultimate dismissal. But I didn't wait. I reached out and took the portrait of Mary from the buyer's grasp. "This is not for sale," I said, my voice ringing with an authority that silenced the room. Chloe whirled around, her face flushed with anger. "Robert, put that down. You have no right. That belongs to us now. I have every right," I roared. The sound echoed off the walls I had built. The strangers froze. The chatter died instantly. "This is my house, and you are trespassing." Linda rushed over, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you? You abandoned this house. You left. We have witnesses. I was forced out." I shot back. Under false pretenses. I looked at Frank, at Linda, at Chloe. The mask slipped. The fear showed. "There was no flood," I announced, my voice clear and strong. "You were evicted. You are broke. You are frauds. And I know about the plan to sell my house. I know about David Chen." The color drained from Chloe's face. The mention of the realtor's name confirmed their worst fears. The customers started sitting uncomfortably, realizing they were caught in the middle of a war. Frank stepped forward, puffing out his chest, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. "You can't prove anything, old man. We live here now. Ethan gave us permission. We have rights." "No, Frank, you don't," a new voice interrupted. Mark walked into the room, holding the deed of trust in his hand. Behind him were two uniformed police officers, One of them I recognized. Officer Miller, a local cop who knew the neighborhood. The sight of the police shattered the last vestiges of their arrogance, Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, clutching her pearls. Frank's bluster evaporated instantly. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Chloe Williams, Mark announced, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You are hereby notified that you are illegally occupying this property. The sole trustee and beneficiary, Robert Williams, demands that you vacate the premises immediately. Impossible, Linda shrieked, staggering back, her eyes wide with disbelief. It can't be. Ethan, tell them. It's your house. You inherited it. Everyone turned to Ethan. He stood frozen by the dumpster, trapped in the headlights of his own betrayal. Ethan? Chloe whispered, her voice trembling, the mask of arrogance finally slipping to reveal the terror underneath. Tell them the truth. Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with shame, desperation, regret. He said nothing. His silence was a confession, an admission of guilt louder than any words. The house is held in an irrevocable trust, Mark stated clearly, holding up the document for everyone to see. Ethan has no current ownership claim. The property cannot be sold. He paused, letting the weight of the words crush them. Furthermore, by compromising Robert's residency and well-being, he has triggered the morality clause. He has likely voided his future inheritance entirely. Chloe stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror. The realization that she had miscalculated so spectacularly, that her greed had cost her everything, crashed down on her. Her empire, built on lies and entitlement, crumbled in seconds. You knew, she whispered, the accusation laced with venom. You let us believe. I let you show me exactly who you are, I replied, my voice cold and steady, devoid of pity. And you showed me that you are thieves, liars, and vultures. Officers, Mark said, gesturing to the crowd, please clear the premises. This estate sale is officially closed. All transactions are void. Please return the items to the house and collect your refunds from Mrs. Williams. Chaos erupted. Customers argued, demanding their purchases. Officer Miller and his partner started firmly ushering them out of the house. Sarah Jenkins stood on the sidewalk, watching the spectacle with wide eyes. The whole neighborhood knew. You can't do this, Frank blustered, his voice rising in panic. We have nowhere to go. We have no money. You should have thought of that before you tried to steal my home and sell my memories. I said, We'll sue, Linda cried, genuine tears streaming down her face now. The performance over. You can try, Mark said calmly, but I would advise against it. We also have evidence of attempted fraud regarding the power of attorney and the illegal attempt to list this property with Mr. Chen. We are considering pressing charges for elder abuse and fraud. Chloe's face turned ashen. The fight left her eyes. Defeat settled over her like a shroud. Within minutes, the house was empty, except for me, Mark, the police, and the shattered remnants of my family. Ethan finally moved. He walked towards me. His shoulders slumped, his face streaked with tears, the reality of his actions finally sinking in. Dad, please, he whispered, his voice broken. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the estate sale. The power of attorney. I didn't know how far she would go. But you knew it was wrong to kick me out, I said, my voice heavy with disappointment. You stood by while they tried to erase your mother's memory. You threw my blueprints in the dumpster, Ethan. I was weak, he whispered. The confession raw and painful. I was afraid of losing her. She kept saying this was for our future, our family. And instead, you lost everything, I said. Your home, your inheritance, and my respect. I turned to Officer Miller. I want them out. Now. Chloe, Linda, and Frank were escorted out of the house, their suitcases thrown onto the lawn after them. Their cries of panic and disbelief echoed down the driveway. It's impossible, Linda shrieked one last time before getting into their SUV, the only asset they had left. It can't be, but it was. And they never saw it coming. The sirens faded. The sudden silence in the house was deafening. The aftermath of the storm was everywhere. Empty spaces where furniture used to be. Price tags scattered on the floor. The scent of greed and betrayal lingering in the air. thick and toxic. Mark called a locksmith. The locks were changed within the hour. The fortress was secured. Ethan stood in the middle of the wreckage, his face buried in his hands. He was sobbing, broken, realizing the magnitude of his betrayal and the cost of his silence. I watched him, the anger slowly receding, leaving behind a profound sadness. He was my son, and I loved him, but I could no longer ignore the man he had become. "What now, Dad?" he whispered, looking up at me. His eyes red and swollen. "Now you have a choice, Ethan," I said, my voice tired but firm. "Chloe and her parents are gone. They are not welcome in this house, or in my life. Ever again." Ethan flinched. "But Chloe is my wife." "She is your wife, but this is my home. If you choose to stay with her, you need to find a new place to live. You are on your own. The inheritance is gone. You need to stand on your own 2 feet." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. It was tough love, the hardest kind to give. "And if I choose to leave her?" he asked, his voice trembling, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. "Then you need to prove that you understand what family means. You need to earn back my trust. But it will take a long time, Ethan. A very long time." I left him there, standing in the ruins of the life he almost destroyed, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. The next few weeks were quiet. The silence in the house was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful, healing. I spent my days repairing the damage, both physical and emotional. Mark helped me track down some of the buyers. I bought back some of the furniture, the pieces that mattered. I reorganized my workshop, familiar scent of sawdust and oil, a comforting balm to my wounded soul. Ethan chose to stay. He initiated divorce proceedings shortly after the eviction. Chloe didn't fight him. She had nothing left to fight with. Frank and Linda disappeared, likely moving on to their next target. Ethan slept in the guest room, spoke only when spoken to, his shame a palpable presence in the house. The distance between us was vast, a chasm carved by betrayal, but it was a start. He started helping around the house, slowly, hesitantly, cleaning the gutters, mowing the lawn, small acts of contrition. One evening, I decided to track down the rest of Mary's music boxes. I found the last one in a small, dusty pawn shop downtown. It was the one I had given her on our first anniversary. The delicate mechanism was broken, the ballerina inside tilted at a sad angle, her porcelain arms chipped. I bought it, took it home, sat at my workbench in the garage. I worked for hours, the familiar rhythm of the work soothing my soul. I carefully repaired the tiny gears, reset the ballerina, restored the delicate beauty of the piece. The craftsmanship a form of meditation. Ethan walked in, drawn by the light. He watched silently as I worked, the respect dawning in his eyes, a realization of the skill, the patience, the love that went into my craft. Finally, I closed the lid and wound the key. The sweet, familiar melody of our wedding song filled the garage, a ghostly echo of the love that had built this house. Ethan's breath hitched. "That was Mom's favorite," I nodded, handing him the music box. "Family is like this, Ethan. Delicate, precious. If you break it, you can try to fix it, but it takes patience, care, and love." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since that night. And sometimes the damage is too great. The scars remain. He held the music box, tears streaming down his face, the melody a soundtrack to his remorse. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything." "I know, son. I know. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. The road would be long. The trust might never be fully restored. But it was an acknowledgement of the possibility of healing, of rebuilding. The house felt different now. It was quieter, emptier, but it was mine. I had fought for it, protected it, and in the process I found a strength I didn't know I had. I sat in my recliner, the portrait of Mary hanging above the fireplace once again, her smile a silent benediction. I had kept my promise to her. Our fortress was safe, and as the evening light faded, casting long shadows across the room, I finally felt at peace. The victory was bittersweet, stained with loss. But it was a victory nonetheless. I was no longer just surviving. I was home. Thanks for listening. Please rate our story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't not to subscribe. Your support means a lot, because your time matters.